In this study by Morisco from 1948, white has a bishop and black has a knight and a pawn. In other words, we're not going to win the game with white here, but we have to somehow stop this pawn, meaning secure the draw. And there is only one correct move to do that. With that, welcome to the most beautiful chess problems of all time. Feel free to pause the video and try to find the best move for white. This is your chance to pause the video. Now let's take a look at what happens if white plays a relatively natural move here, like bishop to h4. We're simply staying on the diagonal here, and as long as we manage to take out that pawn on f2, everything's fine, and we won't lose the game. But how does it continue? Black plays knight to e3. Now here's the thing. The bishop here doesn't have any squares left on the diagonal. In other words, we actually need to make an improving move with the king. King to g1, pretty much the only sensible move in this position. Now comes knight to f5. And yes, now this becomes a problem for us with the bishop, because we really don't have many squares left. We can still go to f2, because luckily the king is now protecting this bishop here. But now comes f3. And now we have a little zugzwang motif here. This bishop just can't move well along the diagonal because all the squares are blocked. The king also can't move, otherwise the bishop here would simply be captured. That's why the bishop goes to a7. It has to take the other diagonal. But now, black's trap snaps shut. Knight to e3. The knight. It blocks the bishop's diagonal here, and the pawn will simply be able to promote in the next few moves. And if we think we can just capture the pawn with white, unfortunately that doesn't help us at all, because the pawn is simply lost. That's why white won't be able to get a draw in this position. Let's go back to this position. Bishop to b4 could also be an idea, but then the motif actually comes into play even faster. The knight on e3 simply blocks this diagonal. And yes, because there's just no way to stop the pawn with the king alone. And now it's a bit of a process of elimination. So if we move along this diagonal, it doesn't help us at all, because then black has an easy time with knight to e3, blocking the bishop's diagonal. And if we play bishop to h4 here, we've already seen that the zugzwang motif comes into play, and white won't be able to hold a draw. Right, then, there are only two squares left on the diagonal, and it's the move you might least expect. That's it, bishop to g3. We're basically giving up our bishop here, but you'll quickly see that it doesn't help black at all to simply capture the bishop, because king to g2 follows. And black simply can't defend the pawn here. It falls. And with only the knight, it's a draw, because you can't checkmate with just a knight. If we go back to this position, black might think, okay, capturing the bishop here doesn't help me at all. But what happens if I just keep going? Well then, white of course plays king to g1 here, and this bishop, as soon as the pawn advances, would simply snap it off, and white has a guaranteed draw. Now black might still think about trying to use this motif with the knight, and block the squares along the diagonal again. But now the subtle difference is that the bishop moves to f2. And black can't play f3 here to make a waiting move and put white in zugzwang. Instead it's black to move now, and in that sense, black is the one in zugzwang. Black doesn't have any meaningful or just a good move to make here that would force the light-squared bishop to switch to this diagonal. That's why white can hold a draw in this game. And if the knight goes to h6, that's not a good defense. For the sake of completeness, let's also take a look at this move. Knight to f6. Then comes bishop to f2. The knight attacks again here and of course controls important squares. But none of that helps either. And white can hold the draw here, since this bishop has no trouble controlling f2. That was today's study. And if you enjoy studies like this, I'd really appreciate it if you gave it a like. And I've linked another of my translated videos here, feel free to click on it. And then I'll see you again in the next video.